The point at which the land meets the water is what's commonly known as a riparian area. Those areas surrounding our gorgeous lakes, estuaries, streams, and rivers. These wonderful places provide critical habitat for wildlife, and while riparian areas comprise only a very small portion of the land, they're an extremely important component of healthy watersheds and ecological function. Unfortunately, however, there are areas where a functional, healthy riparian zone no longer exists. Streams that were once lined with large, mature cottonwood trees, willows, and other riparian species may now only be lined with limited grass or sedges that are not capable of fulfilling the many important roles these areas once offered. Urban development, improper grazing practices, and unsustainable timber harvesting practices are just a few examples of what is threatening our riparian zones. Deforestation of riparian vegetation can lead to significant increases in water temperature, algal blooms, erosion and sedimentation, and severe loss of habitat. Fortunately, here in the Slocan Valley, British Columbia, Canada, a group of residents have formed a non-profit society known as the Slocan River Streamkeepers. Part of their mission is to prevent the loss of more of these important areas while trying to restore ones that have already been damaged. We met with Grégoire Lamoureux, the coordinator and manager of the Slocan River Riparian and Wetland Restoration Program, to hear what he had to say about the current projects they are undertaking.
The Slocan River Streamkeepers is a non-profit society that's based in the Slocan Valley in British Columbia in the BC interior, just outside of Nelson. We mostly look at the lower bottom valley ecosystem along the Slocan River, and learning more about the whole ecosystem of the Slocan River is our goal, and how can we interact and create a better place for everybody to live. We're fortunate it's one of the few rivers in southern BC that hasn't been dammed, so there's no dam per se on the Slocan River, so it flows naturally, into the Kootenay River and eventually to the Columbia River. It has been impacted by the dams in the Columbia River. Unfortunately, we have lost the salmon. The salmon used to swim up the river, but now they're not here anymore. We've had a few different impacts on the river. When you first arrive in the Slocan Valley, you look at the river, it looks very nice. You can see, clear water, see to the bottom, but there are still many different impacts. There's been impact from mining, from clearing, from homesteading. The land, the bottom valley has been cleared. There's very little or hardly any natural riparian ecosystem. The large trees, all the large cedars have been removed. There's very few large cottonwood ecosystem left. With our Riparian Restoration program, we have worked with over 40 landowners, restored approximately 40 projects, and that created the equivalent of 5 kilometers of riverbank restored. So now we're adding more wetlands, so some landowners are willing to contribute their land so that we can also restore wetland. The purpose of the wetland restoration, again, is to minimize flooding downstream, also store the water for a longer period of the year, again creating habitat for the amphibians and the wildlife. And the long-term goal is also to reduce the mosquito populations, having habitat for the predators of the mosquitoes, such as the swallows. We put bird box on those. The wetland itself is habitat for all the amphibians, the western toad and the frogs, the local frogs, Columbia spotted frogs. The dragonflies also likes to breed in these habitats. So we're also monitoring these wetlands, and we're finding, so far, it's still early stages, but we're finding a lot less mosquitoes in our restored wetland than in those flooded fields that seem to create a very prime habitat for mosquito larvae and mosquito in the summertime here.
As riparian zones are always found on the water's edge, they offer home to water-loving plant species, which in turn support many different ecosystems. The ecological benefits of riparian zones are numerous. Healthy riparian zones help to filter and purify water for drinking, irrigation, and recreation. The vegetation and soils in riparian zones soak up and store water during high rainfall events and help prevent floods.
Natural or mature large cottonwood groves or cottonwood riparian ecosystem are very rare, first of all, and endangered or threatened. So basically, if you have on your property big, large cottonwood by the river, close to the river, basically leave them alone. You don't necessarily want big, large cottonwood near your house, but along the river, that's where they belong. Legally, you're not allowed to cut any trees along the river because it's a fish-bearing river.
I took a ski up beyond Perry's a few weeks ago, and you go around the corner and you see this big open field. And you know that 100 years ago, it was a huge cottonwood forest. And humans have spent the last 100 years cutting those trees down and creating paddocks and farms and whatnot. And now we're at a point where we want to protect those areas because they are precious to life, sustaining life here. And so we'll be going the other direction. We'll be planting those trees again. And so in another 100 years when we go back there, we'll see our cottonwood forest return.
The Riparian Restoration project, the main component is the replanting of native species. So we planted again a diversity of deciduous, and if the site is appropriate, we'll put in some evergreen as well. But main species are the willows, the cottonwood, the red osier dogwood, alder as well is a good one. So we're putting these species, but we're having to protect them. So either we'll put up a fence or we put some tree protectors. So if the landowners has animal, cattle, or livestock, I've worked with some landowners and creating some fencing for them or restriction for them so they don't go into the river. So we're trying to prevent that as well. And then lately we've been able to put some bird boxes to enhance both riparian and wetland ecosystem as well. So creating more habitat, because until our trees get a certain size, you need some larger trees to have a cavity nesting bird like the swallows be able to have natural homes. So they like our human built, constructed houses. Our little nesting box seemed to be very popular. We just put one up a couple of days ago, and within a few minutes the birds were moving in and checking out the nesting box. So that was pretty cool.
On top of the many benefits we have already discussed, riparian areas offer a home to many different types of plants and animals. Herbaceous and aquatic plants such as rushes, sedges, cattails, skunk cabbage and water lilies that grow in and immediately adjacent to the water. Trees such as western red cedar, black cottonwood and mountain alder, which can grow some distance back from water bodies, but require moist soils that riparian zones offer. Thousands of species of insects, including mayflies, caddisflies, stonefly nymphs and water beetles, find home in these riparian areas. And birds such as mallards, Canada geese, swallows, ospreys, eagles and red-winged blackbirds enjoy all that our precious riparian zones have to offer. Stream corridor vegetation gives stability to stream banks, preventing banks and shorelines from being washed away. Due to the abundance of moisture in the soil, the riparian areas are very ecologically productive, and the large volume of trees and vegetation produced by these areas take up carbon dioxide, thereby helping regulate greenhouse gases. Trees and shrubs that border and overhang streams and lake shores moderate the temperature of the water through shading. This directly benefits fish and aquatic invertebrates and prevents excess algae growth. Leaves, twigs, needles and whole trees that fall into water bodies provide nutrients to aquatic invertebrates, which in turn nourish fish. So it is without question that these areas are an essential aspect of any healthy ecosystem and should be cared for and protected.
We work with many of the local schools and different school students of different age, different grades, so they come out and help us, work with us. The recent project, they planted some sedges and they'll plant the trees and the shrub, the willows and all of that, so that we're able to have them involved and participate. So hopefully in 10, 20 years they'll be paddling down the river, swimming down the river, and they remember that they planted those trees. I call it planting seeds. We like to plant some seeds in these young minds so that they see the importance of these beautiful natural ecosystems, so that they can be, again, protecting and keeping them intact or helping with restoration. It's a long-term vision. We're planting very small little trees, and we want to see them grow for the next 50 to 100 years. So we cannot restore a whole ecosystem like this in 1 year or 5 years. We've been at it for almost 15 years now, so there's still lots of work to do.
When I see how everything's going around the world, especially with the pandemic and everything that's happening, and I see this thing that happens where people come in waves to the country, but every group that comes out is in some ways got to start from scratch and realize how sensitive, how precious, how fragile this world that they're coming to really is. So if I was going to have a dream about the future, I would want the people that come to know how to protect what's here and be willing to adapt to their own natural environment. In other words, allow a wetland to happen on the land. Allow a sod channel to happen. You know, don't block it off. You know, work with the natural world. That's what I would love to see.